There's a lot of elections in American history that I find to be very underappreciated, that a lot of people don't seem to care about too much, but actually had major consequences based on who won the election. And of all of them, I think the 1844 election is probably number one. The 1844 election was held between the 1st of November and the 1st of December in the year, of course, 1844. This was the last time in American presidential election history where it was not on one singular day and it took multiple days to get the election finished. The Democratic candidate looked to be Martin Van Buren, the former president and frontrunner in the DNC that year. However, it ended up going to surprising dark horse candidate James K. Polk. Polk had initially chosen Silas Wright to be his running mate, but he declined the nomination, and in his place, the running mate actually ended up being George M. Dallas. The Whig Party, which had won the previous election, was not going to be running again with John Tyler because John Tyler wasn't a Whig anymore. John Tyler had gone to become an independent after being kicked out of the Whig Party for going against some of their key policies. Henry Clay, the face of the Whig Party, ended up being chosen pretty easily that year for the Whig candidate, and he chose Theodore Frelinghuysen as his running mate. The big issue of this election was the annexation of Texas. President John Tyler's pursuit of Texas annexation divided both major parties. Annexation would geographically expand American slavery, so the South was on board with it. It also risked a war with Mexico, while the United States engaged in sensitive possession and boundary negotiations with Great Britain over Oregon. Texas annexation thus posed both domestic and foreign policy risks. Both major parties had wings in the North and the South, but the possibility of the expansion of slavery threatened a sectional split in each party. Expelled by the Whig Party, John Tyler hoped to use the annexation of Texas to win the presidency as an independent, or at least to have decisive pro Texas influence over the election.
Believe it or not, Henry Clay was the one who was initially tipped to win. He was the famous longtime party face of the Whigs, but he just didn't have a solid answer on the Texas annexation issue. Though a Southerner from Kentucky and a slave owner, Clay chose to focus on the risks of annexation, while claiming not to oppose it personally. His awkward, repeated attempts to adjust and finesse his position on Texas confused and alienated voters, contrasting negatively with James Polk. Many voters came to realize that James Polk had what Henry Clay had that was good and did not have, in fact, the opposite of have what Henry Clay was bad on. James Polk made it clear that he was running on a platform of embracing popular commitment to expansion. This idea is often referred to as manifest destiny. John Tyler dropped out of the race and endorsed Polk because of his position on the annexation of Texas. He supported it. So, historically, throughout the United States, the North and the South couldn't agree on much. But somehow, some way, James K. Polk made them agree. They agreed that the United States needed to expand. This is because Polk successfully linked the dispute with Texas and the dispute with Britain over Oregon together. Polk thus united anti slavery Northern expansionists who demanded Oregon and pro slavery Southern expansionists who demanded Texas. Remember how earlier on in the video I mentioned how James K. Polk had to beat favorite Martin Van Buren in order to become the Democratic nominee? Well, Martin Van Buren was still going to run in this election, silly. Martin Van Buren loved running in elections, as you'll soon find out. In this election, he ran more of an independent who was against the annexation of Texas and against the expansion of slavery, even though he created the Democratic Party, who was pro slavery. And the last candidate that I'm going to mention before we get into the results is Joseph Smith. Smith was the mayor of Nauvoo, Illinois, and the founder of the Latter day Saints movement. If you don't know what the Latter day Saints movement is, He basically founded Mormonism. He ran as an independent under the newly created Reform Party with Sidney Rigdon as his running mate. However, this campaign didn't go too far, as he was killed and beaten in his jail cell in Carthage, Illinois, on June 27th, 1844. 79% of people turned out to vote in this election, which is actually down from the previous election where 80% turned out to vote. The winner of the election got nearly 50% of the vote. It was 49.4% of the vote, winning 170 electoral votes. And you needed 138 electoral votes to win the Electoral College. The winner of this election would turn out to be James K. Polk, which shouldn't have been a surprise because Henry Clay this was his third time running, and I made a very good effort to portray Polk as the good guy, but it was a very close election. Henry Clay easily could have won this election. Polk's election victory certified that Manifest Destiny had a majority support in the electorate, despite Whig opposition. The annexation of Texas was formalized on the 1st of March, 1845. James Polk took office on the 4th of March, 1845. Mexico refused to accept the annexation, obviously because they just lost some of their land, and the Mexican American War broke out in 1846, which was won by the time James Polk left office. It was won in 1848, where James Polk took a lot of land from Mexico. Instead of demanding all of Oregon, Polk compromised with Great Britain. Washington and London negotiated the Buchanan-Pakenham Treaty, which split up the Oregon Territory between the two countries. All in all, this election was very consequential and led to the United States getting a huge chunk of land out of Mexico. And honestly, had Henry Clay won, I don't even know if the United States would be as big as it is today.